Imagine a royal bloodline stretching back 3 centuries, erased in less than 20 minutes. No trial, no witnesses, just gunshots in a basement in a provincial Russian city. Yet for decades, the world wasn't even sure what had really happened. Officially, a revolution triumphed. Unofficially, a dynasty vanished. But here's the twist. This wasn't just the fall of one royal family. This midnight decision helped rewrite the map of European monarchy itself. So what was so dangerous about these last Romanovs that they had to die together, in secret, on a summer night in 1918? By 1914, Europe looked like a family reunion wearing crowns. The British king, the German Kaiser, and the Russian Tsar were cousins. Royal weddings stitched the continent into one glittering web of bloodlines. On paper, that should have meant stability. In reality, it meant something darker. When one dynasty fell, it pulled others with it. And at the center of this web stood the Romanovs. But the story of their disappearance doesn't begin with executioners in Yekaterinburg. It begins with a desperate empire, a wounded heir, and a war that exposed every crack in the old order. Tsar Nicholas II wasn't supposed to be Europe's great villain, or its tragic martyr. Shy, devout, and deeply conservative, he believed God had chosen him to rule Russia's 125 million people. But that divine mission collided with reality. Industrial strikes, peasant unrest, and the 1905 revolution already shook his throne. Then, in 1914, he plunged into World War I to support Serbia and maintain prestige. It was a disaster. Russian armies suffered colossal losses. Food vanished from cities. Confidence in the monarchy bled out at the front. But that wasn't Nicholas's only problem. Inside the palace, another crisis unfolded. The long-awaited heir, Alexei, had haemophilia, a bleeding disorder inherited from his British great-grandmother, Queen Victoria. One bruise could be fatal. Enter Grigory Rasputin, the mystic peasant whose strange influence seemed to ease Alexei's suffering. Empress Alexandra became convinced he was sent by God. Ministers were fired at Rasputin's whim. Scandals spread like wildfire. Rumors of affairs, German spies, black magic. Whether true or not, they shattered the monarchy's aura. To many Russians, the Romanovs now looked less like God's anointed rulers and more like a family under a dangerous spell. By early 1917, hunger did what bullets couldn't. In Petrograd, women protesting bread shortages ignited mass strikes. Soldiers, exhausted and disillusioned, refused to fire on crowds and joined them instead. The regime's authority evaporated almost overnight. Nicholas, away at the front, tried to return, but trains and loyalty were both in short supply. Under pressure from generals and politicians, he abdicated in March 1917, ending more than 300 years of Romanov rule. A provisional government took over. The family, placed under house arrest. But this was not yet the end of their story, or of Europe's royal nightmare. At first, captivity looked almost gentle. Nicholas, Alexandra, their 4 daughters, and Alexei remained at the Alexander Palace, confined but together. They took walks under guard, read, prayed, posed for final family photos. But something else was happening outside their walls. Across Europe, other monarchs watched in horror. Britain's George V, Nicholas's cousin, briefly offered asylum, then withdrew under pressure from ministers terrified of importing revolution. That hesitation sealed the family's fate. When the Bolsheviks overthrew the provisional government in October 1917, they inherited not just a collapsing empire, but a living symbol of the old order. After the Bolshevik seizure of power, the Romanovs were moved east. First to Tobolsk in Siberia, then, in May 1918, Nicholas, Alexandra, and their most fragile children were sent to Yekaterinburg, an industrial city gripped by radical revolutionaries. There, the local Soviet took no chances. The former emperor was now Citizen Romanov. Windows were painted over. The house was renamed the House of Special Purpose. But the Bolsheviks had a larger problem: civil war. Anti-Bolshevik white armies were advancing. If they captured the Tsar alive, he could become a rallying banner. So, Lenin's regime faced a lethal question. In Moscow, Lenin and the Bolshevik leadership were fighting for survival. By summer 1918, foreign troops had landed in Russia, supporting anti-Bolshevik forces. The Czechoslovak Legion seized stretches of the Trans-Siberian Railway and closed in on Yekaterinburg. The Romanovs suddenly became a strategic liability. Officially, the Bolsheviks later claimed the local Ural Soviet made the decision to execute them. But evidence suggests at least tacit approval from Moscow. They needed to remove the possibility of restoration, permanently. Still, no one expected what followed. Not just the Tsar, but his entire immediate family, eliminated in one brutal night. Late on July 16, 1918, the Romanovs were told to dress. Yekaterinburg was under threat, they said, and they must be moved. Just after midnight, they were led to a cramped basement room in the Ipatiev house. Nicholas, Alexandra, their 5 children, and 4 loyal servants. Chairs were brought for the Empress and Alexei. A firing squad assembled. Yakov Yurovsky, the local Cheka commander, read a short statement. The Ural Soviet had decided to execute Nicholas. Before his words even fully sank in, he gave the order. What happened next shocked even hardened revolutionaries. The execution was supposed to be swift. It wasn't. When the volley began, bullets ricocheted wildly off hidden jewels the Grand Duchesses had sewn into their corsets as emergency wealth. Screams, smoke, chaos. Some family members survived the first barrage, wounded and disoriented. They were finished at close range with bullets and bayonets. Within minutes, a 300-year dynasty lay dead on a basement floor. The bodies were hastily loaded onto a truck, doused in acid, burned, and buried in forest pits. Officially, the Bolsheviks announced only Nicholas's death. The fate of the others became a continent-wide mystery. News traveled slowly, then explosively. In Europe, monarchs read the fragments with dread. If a crowned emperor and his innocent children could be wiped out like criminals, what protection did a crown really offer anymore? In Germany, Kaiser Wilhelm II, another cousin, was already tottering as World War I turned against him. In Austria-Hungary, the Habsburgs faced disintegration. The Romanov massacre was more than a Russian tragedy. It was a warning shot to every throne. The age when royal blood was sacred had ended in a basement. But the consequences were only beginning to unfold. By 1919, 4 great empires were gone: Romanov Russia, Hohenzollern Germany, Habsburg Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. World War I had shattered them, but the Romanov execution showed how final that collapse could be. Kaiser Wilhelm II fled to exile. Austria's Charles VI was forced to renounce participation in state affairs. Across Europe, surviving monarchies like Britain, the Netherlands, Scandinavia scrambled to reinvent themselves as more constitutional, less sacred, more bourgeois. Behind palace walls, one lesson was clear: adapt or risk sharing the Romanovs' fate. Yet for decades, one question still haunted the story. Because the Bolsheviks hid the full truth, rumors filled the vacuum. Had one of the children escaped? In the 1920s, a mysterious woman known as Anna Anderson claimed to be Grand Duchess Anastasia. Her story captivated Europe and America, inspiring books and films. Other pretenders emerged across the continent. For monarchists and exiles, the idea of a surviving Romanov heir was intoxicating, a last thread linking them to the lost world before the war. But it would take modern science and the collapse of the Soviet Union itself to finally close this chapter. In 1979, amateur investigators near Yekaterinburg secretly located a mass grave. Only in 1991, as the Soviet Union fell, were the remains exhumed and examined. DNA testing in the 1990s and 2000s, comparing the bones to living relatives of the Romanovs, including Prince Philip of Britain, confirmed the identities of Nicholas, Alexandra, and 3 daughters. A second grave found in 2007 contained Alexei and another daughter, likely Maria. No miraculous escape, no hidden heir. The Romanov bloodline, in its direct imperial line, had ended in 1918. Yet its ghost still shaped how Europe thought about monarchy and power. Today, Europe's remaining monarchs are carefully curated symbols, ribbon cutters, charity patrons, Instagram presences. But their caution is born from fear as much as tradition. The Romanovs' fate proved that when legitimacy collapses, bloodlines offer no shield. One night in Yekaterinburg helped kill the idea of untouchable royal sanctity and pushed monarchies toward survival by humility. Behind the jewels and ceremonies lies a simple calculation: never again become what Nicholas II represented to his people. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the unknown, subscribe for more uninteresting history.